Montana Territory, 1883. The wind carried the scent of pine and snowmelt as the stagecoach wheels jolted over a rut in the dirt road, making Eleanor Grace clutch her satchel tighter against her chest. She had never seen mountains so close before. They loomed like silent sentries, snow still clinging to their peaks even in spring. Her bonnet itched against her scalp, her corset pinched, and her hands trembled despite the heat inside the coach. She'd traveled over 1,000 miles from her aunt's boarding house in Ohio, and with every mile, the hope that she might be wanted by someone truly wanted had flickered and nearly gone out. She pressed her fingers against the letter in her coat pocket. Ink faded, edges soft from rereading. The words were plain like her. Still, something in the way they had been written, careful, honest, had made her say yes. "I am not a man of many words," it had read. "I have a ranch near Silver Creek. I lost part of my face in the war. I will not lie about it. If you're looking for a fine house and music and dresses, I cannot give you those. But if you are looking for steadiness, work, and a place to belong, I can offer them." She had stared at that line, "a place to belong," until her vision blurred. The coach rocked again, and the driver called down. Silver Creek up ahead. She peeked out the window. A scattering of buildings, a church, a smithy. The town was small, but it looked solid, tucked between the hills. At the edge of the street, she saw him. Isaiah Preston. He stood beside a buckskin horse, his hat pulled low. His left cheek and jaw were hidden beneath a thick leather band, burnished from sun and use. The rest of his face was lean, tanned, with a dark beard trimmed close. His shoulders were broad, his stance quiet but sure. A long scar ran from his temple to the edge of his jaw on the right side, but his eyes steady. Gray-blue watched the coach like he was waiting for something he was not sure would come. Eleanor stepped down slowly, her boots crunching on the hardened earth. "You are Eleanor Grace?" His voice was low, roughened like gravel smoothed by time. "Yes." Her voice caught, so she cleared her throat. "You must be Mr. Preston." He nodded once. "Isaiah's fine." She glanced at his horse, then back at him. "You came alone?" "I do not like crowds," he said simply. "Thought you wouldn't either." She blinked at that. He was right. She had not wanted a fuss or welcome banners. Just a face that looked like it meant what it said. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. "I have a pot of stew on. We can be home before sundown if we ride steady." Eleanor had never ridden a horse before, not properly. But she said, "All right," and he helped her up, his hand warm around her waist. He swung up behind her, and they rode out of town, the sun dipping behind them, painting the sky orange and gold. His ranch sat low in the valley. A modest cabin, a small barn, 2 fields ready to be sowed. Chickens scratched near the fence line, and a dog dozed on the porch. Inside, the cabin was cleaner than she expected. A wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, a cot in the corner, another room beyond a curtain. "You can take the bedroom," he said. "I will sleep out here until we figure things." Eleanor set her bag down slowly. "You do not have to. I want to make sure you are comfortable." She turned to thank him, but the words caught when his eyes met hers. He did not look away from the scar or her plain brown dress, or the fact that she had nothing but a single worn trunk to her name. Instead, he ladled stew into a bowl and set it before her. "Eat," he said. "You look like you have not in days." She smiled. Not because it was funny, but because no one had said that to her in a long time. They ate in silence, the fire crackling. When she finished, he took her bowl and washed it without comment. Then he handed her a folded blanket. "I will be outside a bit. If you need anything, just knock." Eleanor stood in the doorway after he left, watching him walk the fence line in the twilight, the dog trailing behind. The sky was streaked with stars. He moved like a man who had been alone a long time, but not because he wanted to be. Because something had told him it was safer that way. She understood that more than she liked. The next morning, she rose early and found him already outside, chopping wood. He looked up, sweat on his brow. "You do not have to work," he said. "I want to," she replied, picking up a basket of kindling. "I did not come all this way to sit still." He watched her for a long beat, then nodded. Weeks passed. Spring deepened. She planted onions and beans, patched a window, mended his shirts. He taught her how to ride on her own. She learned where the creek curved behind the ridge and how to call the cows in before dusk. They spoke little, but when they did, it always mattered. One afternoon, a storm rolled in fast. Loud, angry thunder. Eleanor was out gathering eggs when it hit, and the wind slammed the coop door shut, trapping her inside. She cried out, but the wind swallowed the sound. Then she heard Isaiah's voice shouting her name. He found her, yanked the door open with both hands, eyes wild. "You are safe," he said, voice hoarse. "You are safe." She reached for him without thinking, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I thought," but the words failed her. He pulled her close, his arms strong and solid, and for the first time since arriving, she cried. Not from fear, but from relief. That night, after the storm passed, he brought her a mug of warm cider. "I should have built that coop better." "You built this whole place by yourself," she said. "You did just fine." He looked at her, long and quiet. "I know I am not easy to look at." Eleanor reached up, gently touching the edge of the leather band across his face. "You are easier than most." He stared at her, the air thick between them. "I do not know what you see in me," she whispered. "I see color," he said. "When I look at you. I do not know why, but I do." Her breath caught. "I have not seen color since the war," he added, voice low. "But when you stepped from that coach, it came back." Eleanor pressed her hand against his chest, over his heartbeat. "That is the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me." "I meant it," he said simply. And she believed him. That night, for the first time, she did not close the bedroom door. The morning after the storm, the ground held the scent of wet cedar and churned earth. Eleanor stepped barefoot onto the porch, the boards cool beneath her heels. Isaiah was near the paddock, coat off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, tending to a slat that had come loose in the wind. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he was thinking his way through each nail. She watched him for a moment before stepping down into the yard, carrying a tin basin and a scrap of lye soap. He looked up briefly, then back to his task. "The chicken wire pulled loose along the west side," she said, setting the basin near the pump. "If the foxes get wind of it, we'll lose half the hens." "I'll fix it before dusk," he answered. She began scrubbing the mud from her skirts, the pump creaking as she worked the handle. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It hung like linen on a line clean, waiting. Isaiah finished hammering and leaned on the fence, watching her. "You ever mend a harness?" he asked. "Once," she said. "My uncle kept a mule. Stubborn thing, liked to bite." He nodded.
"Mines worse."
"Broke the strap clean through this morning. Thought I'd show you how I stitch leather, if you've a mind." She dried her hands on her apron, then followed him to the barn. The air inside was warm with hay and horses. He pulled a stool beside the workbench and motioned for her to sit. As he threaded a thick needle with wax sinew, she studied his hands. The scars along his knuckles didn't match the ones on his face, older, faded into the skin like tree rings. "Was it always ranch work for you?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "No," he said finally. "I tried mining when I came home. Couldn't stand the dark. Then I tried rail work.
Too many people.
Ended up here alone. Figured I'd do better with animals than men. You didn't mention that in your letter." "I didn't figure it mattered." She picked up a strip of leather, feeling the worn grain under her fingertips. "It does. It helps me know you." He glanced up, the needle paused mid-stitch. "Tell me something about you, then," he said. She hesitated. I used to play piano, she said. Not well, but I liked the sound of it. We had one at the boarding house. I'd sneak down early, before the girls woke. Why'd you stop? Felt like it belonged to someone else. The house, the keys, the mornings. None of it ever felt mine. Isaiah resumed stitching, slower now. I've got a fiddle in the loft, he said. Was my brother's. She looked at him. Does it still play? Strings are dry, but I reckon we could fix it. They worked in companionable quiet. He showed her how to loop the sinew, how to pull without tearing. When they finished, the harness looked near new. She brushed her hands on her skirt. I'll take it to the tack room. I'll come with you. The room smelled of worn leather and linseed oil. As she hung the harness, her fingers brushed the edge of an old saddlebag. Inside was a small book, the cover cracked. You mind if I look? She asked. He stepped beside her, peering down. Go ahead. She opened it gently. Inside were sketches, animals mostly, a few trees, one of the cabin, rough but tenderly drawn. You did these? He nodded. They're good, she said softly. I used to draw more, he said. Stopped after. He didn't finish the sentence, and she didn't ask him to. She closed the book and handed it back. You should start again. He tucked it into the saddlebag without looking at her. Maybe. That evening, as dusk settled and the lanterns were lit, she found him on the porch, whittling a piece of pine. I thought about what you said, he said. She sat beside him, drawing her shawl closer. About what? About fixing the fiddle. She smiled. And I'll need your help. They sat there, the two of them, watching the last light fade behind the ridge, pine smoke curling into the sky. His leg brushed hers once, warm and solid, and he didn't move it away. When she finally stood to go inside, he touched her wrist, just once. Eleanor, he said. You ever miss Ohio? She looked down at his hand, rough and scarred but gentle on her skin. No, she said. Not once since I got here. He let her go, but his eyes held hers a moment longer than they had the night before. And when she lay in bed later, the door still open, she listened to the sound of his quiet movements beyond the curtain and felt, for the first time, like she belonged somewhere that didn't need permission. The fiddle lay open on the table, its strings removed, bridge loose, the bow tucked beside it like an old friend waiting to be remembered. Eleanor turned it over gently, careful not to press too hard on the worn wood. Dust clung to the edges, and the varnish had paled in spots, but it was whole. Isaiah stood behind her, arms crossed, gaze resting not on the instrument but on her hands. I don't know much about fixing one, she said, but I can clean it. Oil the pegs. We can get it singing again. He didn't answer at first, only stepped forward and set a small tin of rosin beside her. I kept it even after he passed. Thought maybe one day I don't know. Didn't feel right, touching it alone. She didn't ask about the brother. She could feel it in the way he said past, like it still lived quiet beneath his ribs. I don't play, she said, but I can listen. Then that's more than it's had in years. They worked side by side through the late afternoon, cloth and oil, careful hands, each movement slow and deliberate. He showed her how to thread the gut strings through the pegs, how to tighten them evenly. She held the body still while he adjusted the bridge, his fingers steady despite the stiffness in his joints. When they finished, he drew the bow across the strings. A dry, tentative sound filled the room, raw but not broken. That's something, he said. She smiled without turning. It's a start. The next day brought a sharp wind and a sky bruised with a threat of rain. Eleanor tied her hair back with a strip of muslin and walked the pasture fence with Isaiah. A post had begun to lean, the base softened by damp earth and time. I'll need to brace it with something stronger, he said, kneeling to check the footing. Maybe cut a length from that old pine near the shed. I can hold the post while you drive it in, she offered. He glanced up, one brow lifting. You ever swung a maul?
No.
But I've washed a week's worth of linens by hand. I think I can manage.
He didn't argue.
Instead, he gave her the maul and showed her the angle. She braced her stance and brought it down hard. The vibration jolted her arms, but the sound it made, clean and final, felt good. They worked in rhythm, the post straightening with each strike, until the footing held true again. Afterward, she leaned against the rail, catching her breath. Feels different, doing something that stays fixed after it's done. He stood beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. You get used to that feeling out here. Back east, everything came undone, no matter how tight I stitched it. His eyes stayed on the horizon. That why you answered my letter? She nodded. I didn't think you'd pretend things were easier than they are. They're not, he said. But they can be better. That evening, with the wind rattling the shutters and the fire burning low, Isaiah pulled the fiddle to his shoulder and began to play. The tune was slow, unfamiliar, but it settled into the bones of the room like it belonged there. Eleanor sat at the table, mending a tear in one of his shirts, but her needle paused mid-stitch. You made that up? She asked.
He didn't stop playing.
Started it years ago. Never had a reason to finish. She folded the shirt and set it aside. What would finishing it sound like? He quieted the strings with his palm, then looked at her. I don't know yet, but I think I'm closer than I was.
They didn't speak again that night.
He played until the lamp burned low, and when she stood to go to bed, she didn't close the curtain that divided the room. Neither of them did. The next morning, the first green shoots of beans broke through the soil by the west fence. Eleanor knelt beside them, brushing dirt from their leaves. She didn't call Isaiah over. She'd tell him later, when the sun was higher and the coffee was on. For now, it was enough to feel the earth warming beneath her knees and to know things were growing, slow and sure, right where she'd planted them. The creek had swollen with spring runoff, its current running fast and cold across smooth stone. Eleanor stood at the edge, skirts gathered in one hand, watching Isaiah brace a plank across two rocks to form a narrow bridge. The sun hadn't yet crested the ridge behind them, but the light was rising gold at the edges, soft as breath. That'll hold, she asked, eyeing the plank. It'll do for now, he said, tightening the rope at each end. We'll saw something sturdier once the snows melted off the ridge pine. She stepped onto the wood carefully, arms out for balance. He watched her, hands loose at his sides, though his eyes tracked every movement. When she reached the far side, she turned and smiled, not wide, but enough that her cheeks lifted. You trust your hands, she said. He looked down at them. Took a long time to. Later, they walked the southern pasture, where the grass had come back in thick and green. Isaiah pointed out gopher holes, places where the ground dipped too soft to be safe for the cattle. She marked them with stakes he'd carved from broken fence pickets. The sun warmed her back, and the wind tugged strands of hair loose from her braid. You ever think about building on? She asked, planting a stake into the earth. He paused, shifting the weight of the shovel across his shoulder. You mean another room? Maybe. Or a loft. Something with light where you could keep your drawings. He didn't answer right away. A meadowlark called somewhere nearby. I had a plan once, he said finally. Before the war. Thought I'd build something bigger. For a family. She looked at him then, not with pity, but with something steadier. You still could, she said. He met her gaze. I'd need help. She pressed the stake deeper with her boothiel. You've got that now. That evening, Isaiah brought down a box from the loft. Inside were scraps of paper, charcoal pencils worn to nubs, and a folded piece of oilcloth. He set it on the table, clearing aside the tin cups and the half-mended harness. I used to draw people, too, he said, unrolling the cloth. Faces. Hands. The things that felt hardest to hold on to. He unfolded one sketch, a woman with her head turned, hair braided over one shoulder. The lines were hesitant, but there was care in every mark. Was she someone you knew? Eleanor asked.
My mother, he said.
Died when I was 16. I kept this from the old place. She touched the edge of the paper. She looks kind. She was. He reached for the stub of charcoal and hesitated. His hand hovered over the page. Would you let me try? He asked. She nodded, and he began slow, careful strokes. He didn't speak, and neither did she. The fire popped in the stove, and the dogs outside barked once, then quieted. When he finished, he turned the paper toward her. It wasn't precise, but it was unmistakably the curve of her cheek, the way her hair waved near the temple, the soft line of her mouth when she was thinking. She traced the edge of the page with one finger. I never knew I looked like that.
You don't, he said.
But that's how I see you. She folded her hands in her lap, quiet for a long moment. Isaiah, she said, what did you think when I stepped off that coach? He turned the charcoal between his fingers. I thought you looked tired, but not broken. I was afraid I wouldn't be enough for you. Her voice was low, steady. That I'd disappoint you. He looked across the table, the lantern light catching the scar that shaped his face. You stepped down like you'd already made up your mind, he said. And I knew then whatever came, you'd stay. She stood slowly and crossed the space between them. He set the charcoal down and rose to meet her. They stood close, the table between them, her hands resting lightly on the edge. I'm not looking for grand, she said. I just want true. He reached out, careful, and touched the side of her face. His palm was rough, but his touch was sure. This is mine if you want it, he said. The land. The house.
Me.
She leaned into the touch, her eyes not leaving his.
I want it, she said.
All of it. He stepped around the table and took her into his arms. No rush, no heat, just the weight of two people who had waited long enough. She rested her head against his chest, and he held her like he'd meant to from the beginning. Outside, the wind turned gentle. The sky stayed clear through the night. And in the morning, the first calf of the season was born small, strong, and standing within minutes. By then, Isaiah had already started drawing again, and Eleanor had begun planning where the new beams would go when they built the loft. They didn't speak of luck or fate, just of what came next together. By late May, the warmth had settled in for good. The morning frost was gone, and the days stretched long and full beneath a sky clear enough to see the far edge of the hills. Eleanor stood at the edge of the ridge pasture, watching Isaiah finish the last of the fence line repairs. The cattle were set to move through soon, and he wanted the boundary strong. She carried a tin pail in one hand, filled with the last of the winter apples she'd stored in the root cellar. She'd sliced them for drying that morning, and the peels had gone to the pigs. It felt good to waste nothing, to know every bit of her effort had a place. You'll wear that hat through, Isaiah said when he reached her, brushing his sleeve across his brow. Sun's been hard this week. I've already sewn another brim, she replied. It's waiting on the nail by the stove. He reached for the pail. You planning to feed me, or just tempt me with the smell? She let him take it, their fingers brushing. There's pie cooling on the windowsill. Is there now? He smiled not wide, but more than she'd seen before. I'll earn it. They walked back together in step. The air was full of meadow pollen, and the cottonwood trees were beginning to shed. Threads of white drifted past like snow, catching in her braid. At the cabin, Eleanor lifted the pie from the sill and set it on the table. She didn't cut it right away. Instead, she reached into the drawer and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Isaiah sat, shoulders still dusted from the pasture. What's that? I sent for something, she said. Last month. Thought it was time. She unfolded the paper slowly, laying it flat. A land claim form, signed and sealed. Your name's on this too, she said. I had the magistrate come out. Quiet like. His jaw worked once before he spoke. You put me on the deed? I didn't come here to be half of anything, she said. This is yours as much as mine. I want it all tied together. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You sure? I've never been more. He looked at the paper, then at her. That makes two of us. They ate the pie in silence, one slice each, the filling still warm. When they finished, he pushed his plate aside and stood. I've got something, too, he said. Been waiting. She followed him outside, the light softening as the sun dipped low. He led her behind the barn where the grass grew high and wild. A small wooden structure stood there frame. No walls yet, but squared and leveled. I started it last week, he said. Didn't want to say anything till the timbers were set. She stepped closer, eyes taking in the beams, the careful joinery at the corners. It's for us, he said. A room above, with windows that catch the morning. When she didn't answer, he turned to her. You don't like it? I love it, she said, her voice thick. I just wasn't expecting. He took her hands in his. I wasn't either.
But you came.
And I want to build something that holds more than just me. She touched his face, then not the unscarred side, but the one he'd hidden for so long. The leather band was gone now. He hadn't worn it in weeks. I'm glad you waited, she said. He kissed her then, there under the unfinished frame, with a scent of sawdust and wildflower in the air. It was steady and sure, like everything he did. She leaned into him, hands curled against his chest, and knew it was the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything it promised. The summer came full with green. They finished the loft together, sawing and sanding and raising the final planks by hand. Eleanor stitched new curtains from old flour sacks, and Isaiah carved their initials into one of the beams, where no one else would see. In August, they stood in front of the preacher at the edge of the pasture. It wasn't grand, just the two of them, the ridge behind, and the sound of wind in the grass. The vows were spoken without flourish. I will hold, she said. I will protect, he answered. They exchanged rings, simple bands hammered from silver he'd traded for in town. When it was done, he kissed her hand first, then her lips, and they walked home the long way, hand in hand, through the field where the cattle grazed. By autumn, the house was finished. The fiddle sat on a shelf near the window, and a new sketchbook rested beside it. Eleanor played the chords he taught her, and sometimes he drew while she did. The first snow came early that year. Eleanor lit the hearth and stacked the fire high, while Isaiah brought in the last of the wood. They sat close that night, her knitting a new scarf, his hand resting on her knee. I used to think peace was something other men got, he said. Something I'd lost too much to earn. She set her needles down and looked at him. You never lost the right to it. You just hadn't found where it lived yet. He leaned in and kissed her, slow and warm, and the snow kept falling outside, soft and soundless. That winter passed quiet and good. They kept to their land, kept to each other. No more letters, no more waiting. Just the hearth, the fields, the rising light of every morning shared. And when spring came again, they planted twice as much. Not out of necessity, but because they had the strength for more. Because they had each other. Their life wasn't grand, but it was full. And every day built on the last, with hands that knew how to hold and hearts that didn't ask for more than what stood true. They grew old in that house. Together. Always.